Advice about advice, navigating contradictions and finding what works for you. In our quest for self-improvement and success, we often seek guidance from those who have achieved what we aspire to. However, this pursuit of wisdom can lead us into a perplexing situation: conflicting advice. How do we reconcile seemingly contradictory recommendations from equally successful individuals? This article explores the nature of contradictory advice, why it exists, and how to navigate it effectively to find what truly works for you. The paradox of contradictory advice. Have you ever found yourself caught between two pieces of advice that seem to be at odds with each other? For instance, if you want to succeed, you have to work more and outwork everyone. Work less, but work smart. Both statements come from successful individuals, and both seem to make sense in their own right. So, which one should you follow? The answer, as we'll explore, is not as straightforward as you might think. Why advice contradicts? Individual circumstances. Every person's situation is unique, shaped by their personality, background, and current life stage. Different paths to success. There's rarely one single route to achieving a goal. Different strategies can lead to similar outcomes. Evolving needs. What works for someone at one point in their life may not be suitable at another stage. Personal biases. Advice givers often generalize from their own experiences, which may not be universally applicable. The contextual nature of advice, a tale of two individuals. To illustrate how the same advice can be beneficial for one person and detrimental for another, let's consider the stories of Mike and Jane. Mike's story. Introverted and socially anxious. Rarely goes out and often declines social invitations. Feels lonely due to lack of friends. Jane's story. Extroverted and socially active. Always accepts invitations and is the life of the party. Struggles with time management and personal priorities. Now, imagine both Mike and Jane receive the following advice: learn to say no to unimportant requests more often. For Jane, this advice is golden. It helps her reclaim time for personal priorities and achieve better balance in her life. For Mike, however, this advice could be detrimental, potentially worsening his isolation. Mike would benefit more from advice encouraging him to say yes to social opportunities. This example demonstrates how the same piece of advice can have vastly different implications depending on the recipient's circumstances. The evolution of advice applicability. An interesting aspect of advice is how its relevance can change over time for the same individual. Let's revisit Mike's story. Initial stage. Mike dismisses the learn to say no advice, focusing instead on saying yes to social opportunities. Middle stage. Over time, Mike builds a robust social circle and makes plenty of friends. Later stage. Mike finds himself overcommit socially, which starts interfering with his business priorities. Final stage. The initially dismissed advice of learning to say no becomes highly relevant and valuable for Mike. This progression illustrates how advice that seems irrelevant at one point can become crucial later on, highlighting the importance of keeping an open mind to different perspectives. Strategies for navigating contradictory advice. Given the complex nature of advice, how can we effectively navigate contradictions and find what works best for us? Here are some strategies. Assess your current situation. Before applying any advice, honestly evaluate where you are in your life and what your current needs are. Consider the source. Look into the background and context of the person giving the advice. Their circumstances might provide insight into why they recommend a particular approach. Test and iterate. Don't be afraid to try different strategies. Treat advice as hypotheses to be tested rather than absolute truths. Be flexible. Be prepared to change your approach as your circumstances evolve. What works now might not work in the future. Seek balance. Often, the most effective approach lies somewhere between extremes. For instance, balancing hard work with smart work. Personalize the advice. Adapt general advice to fit your specific situation. Take the core principle and modify it to suit your needs. Keep a growth mindset. View contradictory advice as an opportunity to explore different perspectives rather than a source of confusion. The toolbox analogy, a framework for understanding advice. Think of pieces of advice as tools in a toolbox. Different tools, advice, are suited for different jobs, life situations. You wouldn't use a hammer when you need a screwdriver, and vice versa. Having a variety of tools gives you more options to tackle diverse challenges. As your projects, life circumstances, change, you'll reach for different tools. This analogy helps us understand that no single piece of advice is universally applicable. It's beneficial to have a diverse toolkit of strategies and perspectives. The key is knowing which tool to use in which situation. Be ready to put away tools that are no longer serving you and pick up new ones. Advanced considerations in applying advice. Esta, the role of intuition. While it's important to consider external advice, don't underestimate the value of your own intuition. Sometimes, you innately know what's best for you, even if it contradicts popular wisdom. Zweiter, cultural context. Be aware that much advice is culturally bound. What works in one society might not be appropriate or effective in another. Always consider the cultural context of both the advice giver and your own situation. Dritter, long-term versus short-term perspectives. Some advice might seem contradictory because it addresses different time horizons. For instance, take risks versus play it safe might both be valid, depending on whether you're thinking short-term or long-term. Vierte, combining contradictory advice. Sometimes, the most powerful approach comes from finding ways to combine seemingly contradictory advice. For example, figuring out how to work hard and work smart simultaneously. Case studies, navigating contradictory advice in different life domains. Career advancement. Contradictory advice. Specialize deeply in one area to become an expert. Develop a broad skill set to be adaptable in a changing job market. Navigation strategy. Consider your industry's trends and your personal career goals. You might choose to specialize in a core skill while developing complementary skills to remain adaptable. Relationships. Contradictory advice. Compromise is key to a successful relationship. Never compromise on your core values. Navigation strategy. Distinguish between preferences, where compromise is healthy, and core values, where standing firm is important. Seek a balance that respects both your individuality and the relationship's needs. Personal finance. Contradictory advice. Save as much as possible for the future. Live in the moment and enjoy your money now. Navigation strategy. Create a balanced financial plan that allocates funds for both current enjoyment and future security. The exact balance will depend on your age, financial situation, and personal goals. Conclusion: embracing the complexity of advice. Navigating the world of advice, especially when faced with contradictions, can be challenging. However, this complexity also offers a great opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. By understanding that advice is not one size fits all, we can approach it with a more nuanced perspective. Remember, what works for others may not work for you, and that's okay. Your needs and circumstances will change over time, and so should the advice you follow. Keep an open mind to different perspectives, even if they seem to contradict your current beliefs. Treat advice as a starting point for exploration rather than an absolute truth. Be willing to experiment, adapt, and change course as you learn more about yourself and your goals. Ultimately, the most valuable skill you can develop is the ability to critically evaluate advice, test it in your own life, and determine what truly works for you. This process of exploration and self-discovery is, in itself, a crucial part of personal growth and success. As you continue on your journey, remember that the goal isn't to find the perfect piece of advice, but to cultivate wisdom and the ability to make sound judgments based on your unique experiences, knowledge, and circumstances. Embrace the contradictions, learn from diverse perspectives, and trust in your capacity to find your own path to success and fulfillment.